heat is still on.
Massive game.
New Zealand to win.
Great kick.
It's been a terrible year for the Wallabies.
You're missing an injection of life.
Stupid guys think they're so good.
Hello and welcome to RuggaMatrix International, episode 248. I'm your host, Jero Sen, joined as always by Ben Kimber. G'day Ben, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Jiro. I'm happy to be here. Happy to be doing show 248.
Yeah, big finals of the weekend. Did you enjoy them?
I did enjoy them, mate, both. Watched them both, went back on replay a couple of times, a few incidents to talk about. Plenty in there.
Plenty. All right, let's go straight into it. What is Ben Kimber's strike issue of the week?
Strike issue of the week, my friend. I do want to go straight to Super Rugby. It is the rugby being played at the moment we want to get into. I will later on want to talk about Wallabies captain, Stephen Moore, hanging up the boots. I think that's a big moment for us to get into and see what that means.
Interesting.
But our issue of the week, and I think it was the obvious one out of the weekend, I think it was the one that had most of the chat afterwards, It was neutral referees. Why don't we have them in Sanzar? People blowing up. Jaco Pepper had a couple of big calls in his game. And I think you could even put it in New Zealand and say Glenn Jackson's an ex-Chiefs player if you want to go down that road. But really, for a semi-final, it's all on the line, sudden death in South Africa. I think neutral refs, I think you've got to have them.
All right, so it's really a cost-cutting exercise, isn't it? You want to use the local referees. As a former state referee in touch football, referees don't care who's going to win the game. They really don't. And but the problem is here, you just take that any chance of bias or any sort of, I don't know, subconscious bias out of the picture by making sure they are neutral. I agree, you just have to do it. It doesn't guarantee a better performance, though. No. Let's get that out of the way.
No, well, but I think to that point, I think any suggestion that the refs are dodgy or anything like that is a disgrace. Okay, I think these refs are all professionals. I think they all put it in. Some are better than others. Some of them have, clearly make more mistakes than others. But to suggest that that's a result of their nationality, I think is awful. I don't want to hear it. But I also don't think that pressure should be part of the game. Now, look, Sanzar, bring in tight a little bit. You stuff the structure, you stuff the draw. How about you spend a little bit of money next time around and make sure that you get this bit right? I'd say I want neutral referees all the way through, if possible. It doesn't have to be touchies, but at the man in the middle, unless he goes down injured, neutral, please, surely.
Yeah, and, obviously sometimes the international game suffers when we went to neutral referees, and the hometown referees obviously made decisions in the past that people weren't liking. Once again, the referees love refereeing the game. They're not there to make sure the home team wins. You'd think so, but I believe that honestly. So having said that though, Ben, the refereeing performance, particularly by Jaco in Game 2, wasn't that great. Probably a very poor decision where Beauden Barrett was sent to the bin. I
don't think he went that bad. I think there are a couple of moments you can talk about. We've talked about
that's a huge.
We've talked about interpretation.
I thought his second half was poor.
I disagree. I thought he went okay. Now that call, absolutely, that call was a harsh call. I think, but it wasn't beyond the realms of possible to make that call. So that call, Beauden Barrett, big hit, brings the man down, is lying on the wrong side of the ruck, and you heard Jaco explain it. He said the man was in the wrong side of the ruck. His impact and influence there, I have to make a call. So I think the sad fact of the matter is if Beauden Barrett had laid there, it's a penalty at worst, right? He's not going to get yellow carded. But because he had influence, dragging his legs out, and the ball happened to come with it, I don't think that was deliberate. I do not. Hence a harsh call. But the context of the game, the ruck, the position, I can see how he can make that call. I can see it.
Yeah, no, I totally disagree. I thought they shouldn't have lost him. No way they should have lost him. But I don't think that's the reason why it didn't help. The Hurricanes lost the game because the Lions are a bloody good team. There's no doubt about it. And they had a tight game the week before, got through that quite desperately in the end, but they learned a lot and they came out and played pretty good rugby. And I think there was no doubt at altitude that the Hurricanes looked like they were a bit lethargic in that second half, and it just became too much for them. And in the end, the Lions they finished running away.
Yeah. Well, look, let's dig into that game first. Two games on the weekend, clearly. The Crusaders Chiefs was first, but let's go straight into Lions versus Hurricanes. Final score, 44-29. Plenty of points in there. But look, it was all one-way traffic just about in the first half in terms of points. The Canes were on top. They were looking the goods. And the Lions came roaring back, helped in no small part by that 10 minutes of Beauden Barrett in the bin, which did change the game. So I think a couple of points I want to make first up. When I sat down to watch this game, and I hadn't really picked it earlier in the week because I hadn't got into it, but Julian Sevilla didn't even make the starting side. Goosen, or Hoosen if you're a South African fan, was in the team. Sevilla was on the bench, so the bus has really stalled. And for those of you guys who are watching, I watched the game once and then I fast forwarded through the highlights a second time just to watch the important moments. I still didn't pick up when the bus came on, so I don't even know when he played. So let me know what minute the bus came on, if you will. The Hurricanes came out firing, and they came out with a guy called TJ Perenara who really wanted to go. Pounced on that loose ball in the 7th minute, 2 grubbers ahead, gets the scoring opening, and from there, that pace that the Hurricanes wanted to play looked like a serious part of the game. But 30 minutes in or so, the pace changed. The Lions started to play a bit more of a forwards game, started to bash them a bit more, and the Canes weren't in it.
Yeah, it was definitely the old game of two halves, wasn't it? And they fell away a bit. And I think the Barrett boys would be a little bit disappointed in their performance, but I think across the board, as the game went deep into that second half, that they got away. I really loved the fact that it was an afternoon game too, Ben. It was the sun was shining. It was belting fast rugby, and the South Africans loved playing it too, particularly the Lions. I mean, they played pretty much in that second half like they've played all year. That's what I liked about it, and they still turned it on against a pretty good side like the Hurricanes, who, I don't know if they were joking afterwards, were saying that they wouldn't mind to see them beat the Crusaders.
Dane Coles made that call.
Yeah.
It was like, yeah, go the Lions. I thought that was a massive call.
Well, a few people were saying that he was just being sportsmanlike, playing up to the crowd. But I don't know. Have a look at it, and I think there was a bit of meaning to that. So,
Yeah.
and I've got no problem with that. You know, they're arch enemies, North and South Island. So why not?
Now Coles is working his way back in. Being fully fit again had an impact on the game. A couple of points to call out. Nice second try there from the Canes. I wanted to mention straight off the line out. Milner Scudder standing at first receiver, and Beauden Barrett just drifting around the outside. Where all of a sudden it was beautiful because Beauden's got such a turn of pace that all of a sudden, as he drifted around the back there, he could spot the gap and just go for it. Straight through he goes. Sends the ball out wide, and Goosen goes over. Goosen, of course, who was picked in front of Sevilla and showed why he should have been a couple of times. Nice on that try. But also, I think in the 38th minute, if you didn't see it, go look at his tackle on Janchis with the line open, wrapped him up completely. Of course, Van Rooyen ran over him in the 38th, but that was an enormous prop on a winger. But that try right on half time for the Lions, very, very important. They were outshot 22-3 down or thereabouts. So to rumble their way back in, and rumble they did for a team that's really thrown the ball around and been sharp. They got the forwards moving, they got punching, and they made their way back into the game, which I think you'd have to think the Springboks coaching team would be happy to see.
And that's right, because the Boks have benefited from using those Lions players in the June series. We would have loved to have seen that happen, say, in Australia, for example, but there was no one to pick from that was going really well at Super Rugby level. But this is not a bad final. I think this is a good final. I did tweet that I thought the Canes were the only side that could challenge the Crusaders, but I reckon, Ben, with the travel to South Africa, the fact that the New Zealand sides have had a big battle over the last couple of months, it's been hard work for them with the Lions series and backing up for Super Rugby. I really think that this game will start even Stevens as far as I'm concerned in terms of betting.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if it does. The Crusaders do have to travel, and we know that's an issue. You might even suggest that the Hurricanes' travel might have slowed them down a bit, meaning they couldn't finish off the game with the kind of power and pace that they would have liked to. They couldn't maintain it, though they have been patchy at times this year. They haven't been as good as they were last year.
And it's Joburg too.
It is Joburg, well, which is exactly what the South African teams want to do. You get you up in the altitude and slow you down. So look, that second half, the Lions back into it, the home crowd behind them, and good to see a crowd. And also, I saw early on this week crowds lining up.
30,000, wasn't it?
Yeah, but crowds lining up to buy their finals tickets. So, despite the fact that even the Crusaders finals, the Brumbies finals had low numbers, the South African crowd's getting behind the Lions, which is good. Couple of points in that second half. Now, clearly, Van Rooyen, Mostert, Marks, Ackerman, the Lions forwards really started to stand up. You can complain if you're a Canes fan, as I said, that 10-minute period where Beauden Barrett went off, it went from, I think, something like, 29, 22. By the time he got back on, and he got unlucky, there was a scrum, time was up, but they had to make the play, and at the end of that play, that last try came through, I think, for Yantis before Beauden Barrett could get back on. So, and by the time he got back on, it was 39-29. So there'd been a massive turnaround of points while he was off the park. So one of those moments that did shape the game. I thought Savia went pretty well. Dane Coles, as I said, one of my favourite players still, Kvarga Smith on the Lions back row, ex-Sevens player, just a bulldog, gets in there and goes, a nuggety guy, gets the ball moving, gets it around. He added a lot for me. But you can talk about the decisions and you can talk about that, clearly that change in that 10-minute period. But in the end, it was 5 tries to 1 in the second half, and the Lions came home with a wet sail. Yeah,
it looked like the Canes had the stuffing knocked out of them. You know, it was a really powerful finish by the Lions. But now they meet a team in the final that has been the best team all year. Well, I said it would be a travesty if they lost, and in a way, it is a travesty because they did so well in a really tough group. You know, Darren Ormsby saying there, would the Lions be in this position if they played in a tougher group than the one they played in? Maybe not, and maybe they'd be steeled for this. But the Crusaders certainly are going to be the professional test-like outfit when they play next weekend. Look, the Lions did very well against the New Zealand sides last year. You know, they've done it again in beating the Canes in the semi-final here this year. In the last 2 years, they've beaten all 5 NZ sides. It's not like they haven't played anyone over the 2-year period. And yes, I would much prefer the draw had given a fairer view through the year, but they've done what they've done. They've had the Canes in the semis. They've beaten them. They've now got the Crusaders and the Bulls in their court. Before we move on to the Crusaders game, one last point I wanted to make in that game that was interesting. That Yantis try, which was just after Milner Scudder missed an intercept, which really could have changed things too. But that 68th minute Yantis try when Beauden Barrett was still off the park, the Canes were blowing up after the try, and I couldn't work out why, so I had to rewind and listen to what Pepper was saying. But essentially, he'd given them the wrong information. He talked to the TMO and he knew what he was doing. He was looking to see if there'd been a knock-on in the ruck beforehand. And he said, if there has been a knock-on, then I'm going to go for the offside penalty against you guys. But what he said to the Canes was, if there's no knock-on penalty to you guys. So they were of the assumption that either way, it was either a knock-on or a penalty. So when he awarded the try, they were like, what was that? What was that? But it was the right call. Yeah, I don't think they were happy with the fact that it was a try because they were hoping for the knock-on. Yeah. I was looking suspiciously at that because we never got a replay that I'm sure they had that would have definitively shown the right angle on that. So, and even when we saw, because I'm in TV, I know exactly what happens. So even from the pickup for that try, when we saw the head-on, after the decision was finally made by a TMO, it was always done after the ruck, right? So we never got to see that angle or any angle. Is this a conspiracy theory you're pulling out? Well, I'm just saying, why independent TMOs as well? Mysteriously. No, I'm talking about as a TV guy, right? They should have had the angle. They had plenty of angles, but we didn't give an angle that would have shown possibly it being a knock-on. Look, I reckon they should have just, it was so close, it didn't matter. You know, it was in the flow of the play, of the breakdown, and they certainly deserved the try, the Lions. However, I think that we didn't see the full picture at that point. It brings me back to Rob McQueen back in the early 2000s when they played against England. But I don't think we got the full replays. It's happened in the past. Yeah. Coaches famously claiming that the TV stations gave selected views to the referees to make their decision. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I was sitting in as a punter from TV, worked in broadcasting, and I'm saying we're not getting all the full picture here. But in the end, the result went the way of the Lions. They will host a final. Congratulations. Get out there if you're in Joburg or even outside of, because they said they're going to play for all of South Africa on Saturday night, Sunday morning our time. And I think, will it be Sunday morning our time? I don't know. I'll be up watching it anyway, Benny. It'll be midnight Saturday night for us here. It'll be, I think, 2 a.m. in NZ. Right, okay. So looking forward to that. But well done, Lions. They deserve it. They deserve it. And look, it's a great thing for the competition. Another one of those comments that, maybe the Kiwi fans won't like to hear, but a Kiwi derby to finish it off might have been 2 good teams, but it's nice from, an independent viewpoint to have a South African team and a Kiwi team going up against each other. And the Lions play exciting footy. I like to watch them play. I really do. They look fresh. They're hungry. Yeah. And it's a good thing for the Springboks too. A very good thing for the Springboks. Exactly. Yeah. And just their talk after the game, Ben, was really encouraging. It's like where you want the Springboks to be. Take it back 12 months ago where the Springboks were all over the place, no one backslapping in tackles. These guys are really playing for each other and they're all pumped up. So it's great to see. It is. All right. So speaking of playing for each other, mate,
little
Yes.
segue
Yes.
straight into this Crusaders team.
All right, Crusaders beat the Chiefs.
They did, and I want to start talking about attitude. We've covered this a few times before, but attitude. The Crusaders have it in spades. Couple of moments in the game that the commentators called out. There's 3 players I want to throw in this mix. TJ I mentioned, TJ Perenara. He's grubbers and chasing for that try. He's on the line defence to hold a couple of blokes up at one point and stop tries. Big effort, never stops. Our mate Eddie Jones has said a number of times the stats that he looks at. The stats that he looks at.
Yeah.
How quickly a bloke gets up off the ground and back in defensive line, or up off the ground and back in attack. So how hungry are they? Some of these guys are hungry. TJ's one. But in the Crusaders-Chiefs game, 2 super hungry guys, moments that changed that game. Matt Todd in the 5th minute, the commentators called it out for youngsters. They said, youngsters, watch that. Go and watch Matt Todd. Yeah. In the defensive line.
This was a definitive play, I think.
Cruden goes around him. He turns, chases. Cruden takes a right foot step coming back in field, and who's there? Matt Todd's on his back. Ball is dropped. 5 minutes in, potentially a Chiefs try in the offing, but that effort from Matt Todd got in there.
Yeah.
I also want to point to later in the game, this was a game the Crusaders won on their defence, right? And that defence, as we've said, comes from attitude. This Crusaders team, Scott Robertson, a great player himself, has them humming, has them playing for each other, those efforts they were putting in. And how rare is it to see a try specifically from defence, scoring a try specifically from defence? And that's what happened, I think, in the 49th minute. Goodhue grubbers through a loose ball on the ground. So good defensive and ruck pressure makes an error from the Chiefs. Goodhue grubbers it through. Cruden, under pressure again as the Crusaders are swarming, throws a wild pass way to his left, misses the mark. Ball goes down, picked up by Lowe. Mo'unga flies past and misses him, but gets up straight away. And as Lowe is looking to think, what'll I do now? Mo'unga hits him from behind, the ball pops out, Dag goes over, and the Crusaders clear out. So what a reward for the effort and the attitude that team has shown all year.
Yeah, I agree. The Crusaders were outstanding. Now, I'm not saying that they deliberately were giving up possession to see what the Chiefs could do, but it reminded me of a game that when I was working at the Waratahs, where our game plan was to give it in the wet, was to give it to the Blues at every opportunity, reduce our possession, let them play with the ball, cough it up, and then get the points from there. Tactics. Very rare in the game.
Mackenzie tactics?
Yes, they were. And we won the game.
He was a good tactical coach. Bring him back.
And Benny, we actually absolutely trounced them on that night because tactically we outplayed them. Now, the Crusaders, in a similar way, didn't have possession, but what they didn't have was junk possession. They got the ball for moments, and they made those moments count, right? Yeah. So those moments were really important. And you talked about Todd, Todd misses a tackle, but comes back again and impacts the forces a tackle. But you're also talking about the Chiefs, running out of ideas. I lost count, Benny, of how many times they were recycling the ball, and I thought, big opportunity here, but I know it's going to end in absolute disappointment because I'll cough the ball up. And Cruden again, oh, geez, I'll tell you what.
It's a good time to
head
head off overseas, you reckon?
Let them down in that game. And I think the Chiefs tried their hardest, but they just tactically didn't have what it takes. They said they wanted to hold the ball. But when they had the ball, they just didn't have the ability to penetrate and use the ball in a way. They could penetrate occasionally, but the Crusaders always got there and scrambled in time. But I think the Chiefs, it was a disappointing game from the Chiefs, I thought, and the Crusaders thoroughly deserve it. The Crusaders are an absolute machine. Nothing has changed since they entered the competition back in '96. They play the same way. They absolutely strangle you with their defence, and then they get the scraps. It's the same thing. Yeah. The bodies may have changed, but the same things happen.
Yeah, and that's going to be a really interesting matchup in the forwards next week, right? The Lions, who have been playing fast and loose at times, throwing the ball around, had to grind it out a bit against the Canes, a lot of rolling mauls, pushing the ball forward. The Crusaders' defensive line, very, very clearly the best in the competition. One of the interesting questions will be how much will they regret that decision to rest a few guys in that last round and not have them on deck to potentially secure that home final. If this game was in Christchurch, in a slippery Christchurch, you'd have the Crusaders as red-hot favourites, but I'm with you. Over in Joburg, it's going to be much more even Stevens.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's going to be a tight affair, but I just think in the tight, I reckon the Springboks, the Lions forwards will have an enormous battle against that tight five of the Crusaders. It's an awesome tight five.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to seeing Mostert up against Whitelock, in particular, Van Rooyen up against the All Black front row. Very, very exciting.
Hope it's a really nice day. Obviously, this time of the year, you expect it to be a belter up there in the high felt.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be just an exciting finish. So it's going to be, look, it's a great result for the final because you've got two teams at the top of their game playing each other across half the world, and I think it's going to be a belter. Can't wait.
A couple more points to talk about in that Crusaders-Chiefs game. Now, I know you wanted to mention Mackenzie before. You thought he had a big game?
I thought Mackenzie in a losing side was just enormous. Brave in the air and just everywhere. And some of his passing too, Ben, was brilliant. And, you know, if he was on the other side, he could have scored about half a dozen tries. But, Ben, he was fantastic. And I know you're a fan of his as well.
I am a fan. I do, though, agree with the question mark they raise over whether he can be as effective at that next level. You know that I think there are guys...
That's a fair question.
Yeah, there are guys who kill it at super level and they just don't quite get there at the next level. Interesting to see whether they put him at 5'8" a bit more. He did play first receiver a little bit in the game. But one of the things that they would have also noticed, that 17th minute try, the opening try of the game, the Crusaders spinning the ball wide on their halfway line, or sorry, I think it was short side. It's being left anyway. Kane slips over as Crotty steps back inside him. Crotty then steps ahead. Mackenzie's there and he just whack. Mackenzie's down and over. He went straight through Mackenzie and Mackenzie was very ineffective before Crotty pops the ball, Bryn Hall over for the try. Crotty is growing into a superbly important member of the All Blacks team.
He was critical in the game.
Yeah, he brings a lot. He keeps stepping up and up.
Look, I'm going to say...
But Mackenzie got brushed.
Yeah, and I'm thinking my commentary was based purely on Mackenzie's attacking ability. I wasn't really touching on his defence, which is obviously an issue. But, man, he was just so brave with the ball and taking those high balls. And he was just a shining light with the ball where Cruden wasn't for the Chiefs.
And look, and smaller guys can play at test level. I just don't know if Mackenzie's going to make it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely they can play at test level.
Another moment in the game, clearly, the TMO call on Nanai Williams losing the ball, 21st minute. Cruden throws a very flat ball wide left to Lowe, who takes off downfield and grubbers it. Nanai Williams wins the chase. Every day that's going to get called a try, and it was. One of those ones that in slow-mo you lose it. I thought that was the right call, but it's a rough call. It's a hard call to take as a Chiefs fan if you are, because it looked beautiful in action. He dove, grabbed, I finished over the line. I think he would have thought that was a try. I don't think he would have felt like he lost it, but in slow-mo, looks like it came out.
Yeah, that was interesting because that took a long time. They basically almost took the kick before they decided to check if the grounding was, if it was dropped before the grounding. Yeah, it was. I wanted to see that as a try, but unfortunately, it was just out of his hands. But we do have to be careful, and I've said this on the show before, that not to slow these things too slow. Because if you go really, really slow, and cameras can do over 900 frames a second if you want to, then you're looking at something that's not part of reality, and you will find a separation of the ball if you go really, really slow. But on that occasion, I thought it was fair enough. Hard luck for the Chiefs there, because it was It was a great attacking play.
It was.
Yeah.
3 final quick points out of the game, just from my notes here. You want to look at Crusaders' defensive effort. The kickoff just before half-time, Mackenzie gets a goal, 39 minutes. The Crusaders scramble fully back, all the way back in defence to shut them down. Tamana Valu had a big finish to the game. And finally, Retallick in the 78th minute, still supporting it over for a try. He's one of the best in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Retallick, fantastic. All right, so it's the Crusaders versus the Lions on Saturday night our time. Saturday during the day, obviously in South Africa, and early morning in New Zealand. And we can't wait to see it happen. So well done, those two teams. All right, Ben, let's move on from that. What's your next subject?
So I want to get into, let's call it Cheika Watch for the week, my friend.
Yeah,
all right?
Okay.
Cheika Watch this week doesn't feature Cheika, but it features his influence, I suspect. So the big news out of the last week in Wallabies rugby was Stephen Moore, one of our most capped players of all time. I think he's our second most capped player of all time. Been a fantastic servant of Australian rugby. What a player he has been. Has struggled, clearly, recently. He's hanging up the boots. 2017 is his last year in Wallabies colours. He's given up the captaincy immediately. He's going to give up the Wallabies jersey after the end of year tour, I believe it is. and he's signing off after a long, hard slog as a Wallabies player.
Yeah, and he's been a great servant of the game, but time has caught up with the big guy. I just wonder though, Ben, and we've talked about it, why go through the rest of this year? Why not make the change now? Why not make the change earlier this year and go for the next captain? And we've had a debate about who should be the next captain.
We have.
As we start to run out of time for tonight's show. But who's your choice?
Look,
There's not too many.
the interesting thing about Moore there, clearly, I think, is will Cheika now feel obliged to pick him because he was in and out of the side. He was almost not on the bench a couple of times in the Test series in the middle of the year. And we were wondering what was happening. He named him as captain. He said he's going to be captain. Then all of a sudden he was on a bench that was named late. He stayed in there. Now that he's not going to be around forever, do you start blooding it? Make sure you bring the Latus of the world along. Right now, the only two choices for captain are Hooper and Coleman. Hooper is going to get it. Whether he deserves it, I don't know. I don't know. There is no standout candidate. Coleman could do it.
I don't think he does. I don't think he's got the. He doesn't carry himself the way that a captain needs to be. So I don't think Hooper. Look at the year with New South Wales, for example. But don't forget David Pocock. He's got to come back into the fray as well.
When is he back?
I don't know, but he's off for a bit of a sojourn. And look, I'm never going to be critical of David Pocock. I think he's one of the world's great humans in what he's doing, and that's fantastic. But to keep that little, to get that money as well as being away is a bit of an issue for Australian rugby. So if he comes back, you make him captain, don't you?
Well, I don't know if he's a great captain. I think he's a great player. I think he's a great human, but I don't know if he's a great captain. This is one of those times where you need to find out.
I think he's better than Hooper.
Well, he may well be. But I think Coleman looms as a choice for lots of people because he's an obvious pick. He's going to be number one bloke picked in the team most likely.
Yeah.
He's a lead by example kind of guy. He's captained once, I think, in Super Rugby for one game. But he's one of those guys you'd hope turns into a good captain. He's not standing up at the moment and saying, that's the guy. Yeah,
see, this is the issue. Like when John Eales was made captain, you had no doubt that this guy was going to be around for a long time because he was that good.
But did you have any doubt he'd be a good captain?
Oh, absolutely. He had the doubt. Like
yeah.
John, I knew John at the time, and I worked with him, and I can tell you now there were plenty of doubts about his captaincy when he was there. He said a lot of silly things about the haka, for example, when he was the Australian captain, and he's doing a documentary about that where he's going to find a bit of karma out of that. So I think you do have an issue when you name someone fresh as captain, but they have got to be an absolute dead set pick, and we don't have that at this stage for a long time anyway. But that's the problem. See, Hooper's a great sort of player, but he's moving away from his core role, which is a solid 7, and he's getting too loose in the play.
Well, Hooper's not a great 7 either. He's a fantastic round the park player, but in terms of what we think of as a 7 Australian rugby, he's not an on the ball player.
Yeah.
Pocock is. And so the whole debate when Pocock comes back will again be who's in and who's out, who's playing. So can you pick your captain as a guy who might have pressure on his position more so than others?
Yeah. Well, that's true. That's true. But I think maybe Australia has to look at 7 and harden that up. We're letting players go like that could potentially harden up our 6. One of the big things I thought is a guy like Tatafu Pelota now, who started his life as a teenager as a 5'8", should be a 6. Look at the size of him and how he tackles guys. He is tailor-made to be positioned at the back of the scrum and rucks to cut people in half. Shouldn't be a hooker because his throwing's not that great.
I first met Taff. He was the blindside captain of the CAS school when I was covering schoolboy rugby many years ago. And he was an absolute delight as a young bloke, such a lovely fella. And he was picking blokes up and throwing them around in schoolboy rugby. And he went down the Brumbies and got turned into a 2. Speaking of turning blokes into a 2, Tong and Thor, Taniela from Queensland. Some rumours and mentions in a couple of stories and tweets I saw that maybe he could be turned into a 2 for Australia.
Oh, really?
Very athletic kid.
So I think one of the basics there is you've got to be able to throw. And you've got to start with that.
And that's where Stephen Moore owned that spot.
Yes, Stephen Moore could throw. David Lyons, you shouldn't have to. Look, don't use the hooker as the thrower. I would have loved to see David Lyons throw into the Australia line.
Why do they do that?
He was a great. Well, I think in the old days it didn't matter, but I don't think there's a law against it. But you could see David Lyons hit everyone.
Yeah.
He was a freak with the ball. You couldn't get him to pass it at the field. But
Mate, so that'd be nice. David Lyons, throw to the back and then loop around. Mate.
Oh, he could probably throw it to himself, like run in there and jump and catch. But, I think that goes back to recruitment and having the vision to see how players will develop. It's I think it's too late, obviously, for Taff, but to Taff, who would have been, I would have loved to have seen him play 6. That big throw around the side of the scrum, man, fantastic. Yeah. All right, let's wind it up, Benny.
Viewer comments?
Yep.
Before we go there, we did want to mention the scrum laws, and I think Sully, one of our regulars, Daniel out of the States, posted a good video.
As Daniel says, his friends call him Sully, and we're happy to say we're calling you Sully.
All right.
Sully, thanks for pointing us out. He
shared a good video with us.
Yeah, so the guys, Supersport did a great series of videos on the new law adjustments.
Yes, the new interpretations around the ruck and the scrum, which I think are exciting. We haven't got time this week. We probably will next week.
We'll go through it. We might even get one of the boys to do a demonstration for us.
Hey, there you go.
Look out.
Like
and talk through
it. Wild.
They're really interesting. And I think the breakdown in particular, that's going to be a bit of a game changer.
Yeah.
There's a bit of work to be done there by the player who is the tackler and also the player who is tackled and the first arriving player.
Next week's show.
Yeah, all right.
Want to do some viewer comments of the week. Just shouting out a few of the guys, YouTube and Facebook. Barry Milne on YouTube says it's the best rugby show on the planet. I agree with you, Barry.
Barry,
Love
you're
your
a
work.
legend.
Best
bloke on the planet, Barry.
Jack Kinross, one of the great guys who watches from Nepal, accused us of having Kiwi blood, which we do not have.
No. I wish I did, but we don't.
Glenn B also called out he loves the show. Alan B mentioned that he hates how NZ teams are called franchises. I'd have to agree with that. It's a business more than a team.
But they sort of are because of the way they're set up for Super Rugby. But we know, I call them the Canterbury Crusaders all the time and Auckland Blues because I'm used to the old provinces. So I'm with you. I hate it, but the way that the game's set up for TV, there's sort of a franchise being sold. Yeah.
On Facebook, Jared Thorne, Jordan Katili, Clinton Timothy Eastlander, I think we got stuck in from South Africa, Leon Parra, CPT Hamona, and B-Dub Copy was one of 2 guys, along with Julian Favour, who both suggested and were right on the strike issue of the week this week being neutral referees. Last one to mention is you got called out by Dean Akahata on the Tea Gardens. Do you want to mention?
Oh yeah, we ran into Flash Gordon, one of our old mates from the Wallabies days. So it's good to see all of our old mates running into our fans and our supporters out there, which is terrific. And I've got to try and run into our fans overseas again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because that was a good stopover in San Francisco. But next time I'm in Europe, I've got to hook up with some of you guys. But yeah, Flash Gordon, he's a terrific guy. So that's it for RuggaMatrix International. Now,
give us a thumbs up if you're still there, guys.
Benny, we talked about it. So I've got to do. I'm going to do the Spin Doctor segment next week. So I look forward to doing that. And I've actually looked through a few of my notes. I ran out of time to get it prepared for this week, but there's a lot to go through. But
someone suggested call it Spin It Wide. I can't remember who's
Spin It Wide.
Spin It Wide.
Oh, okay.
It's not bad.
Yeah. All right. Any more ideas about a Spin Doctor, a Spin Zone? Recycle.
Well, if you've got questions around what you get fed by the coaches or the teams or the unions, please ask, because this man's been on the inside. He knows how it works.
Well, you get the big question is this a real deal or what? Some people think, oh, this guy's a great fella. He's putting on a show for the public and the media, but behind the scenes he could be an absolute tosser. So we've had plenty of those, and I don't know if I can reveal those guys, but that certainly is the case. But it was really fascinating, Ben, looking at some of the I actually had the PowerPoint I presented to the players back in 2001 ahead of the Lions series, and about what we were going to do in that series, the battle tactics.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
I don't think I mentioned your name in there. No, no. Some teams have dossiers on journos, but
really,
I never.
Ways to approach them and ways to talk to them.
Yeah, you sort of don't want to put stuff in writing that can come back to bite you, put it that way.
If it gets shared,
yeah, exactly. So I always encouraged our guys to talk openly and honestly with journos they didn't like. And after a while, if they have it out with the journo, they're always in a better space. So.
Just before the show, I was talking about one player who I had a chat with in South Africa once.
Yeah, that's a good story too. We might even... I might even bring that up. I don't think he'd mind about that. Yeah. He's a good fella too. All right, mate. Anything else?
Please, guys, like, share, comment, subscribe. It means a lot to us. It helps us get the show moving. It helps us do more with the show. So let us know what you think and share it out.
All right, there he is, Ben Kimber. Thanks for joining us, buddy.
Was I down the wrong camera then?
No, you were right down the
All right,
middle.
good.
You are now. That's yours now.
All right.
There he is, Ben Kimber. I'm on mine. All right, thanks for joining us on RuggaMatrix International, episode 248. It's been our pleasure to bring the show to you live here on Facebook. Join us on the after show after this. If you're watching on YouTube, we love you. You've been there since the start. Keep those comments coming and share us out and thumbs up, all that sort of stuff that Ben rants on about every week. We love it. Until next week, enjoy your rugby and look forward to the Super Rugby final.